If your housing voucher program keeps rewarding families for showing up on the same schedule, you're not just sending payments, you're building a reinforcement system that can trigger rage outreach spikes when the pattern breaks. Stick with your data long enough, and you'll see how the timing of voucher feed updates can quietly turn frustration into a predictable cascade, leaving you with less control than you thought. Rage outreach spikes happen because housing voucher content often uses a variable ratio reward schedule. You click, you get a win sometimes, you get something else most of the time. A variable ratio schedule means the payoff shows up after an unpredictable number of actions, like pulling a slot machine lever that pays on a random count of pulls. Notice how your brain treats that randomness as a reason to keep going. When a feed mixes a new proof with a fresh outrage at irregular intervals, your attention gets rewarded for persistent checking, not for careful reading. Facts then arrive too slowly to compete with the next hit of emotion, and the burden quietly shifts onto people who have to navigate paperwork, waiting lists, and landlord screening. That shift is not just about feelings. It changes what information you absorb, and when you absorb it, so the voucher process looks more like a trapdoor and less like a program with rules. In B.F. Skinner's classic lab setups, Pigeons pressed a key for food and the timing of the reward. In one schedule, the bird got food after a steady pattern, and in another, the reward arrived after a random number of presses. Notice how the pigeon presses harder when the reward is unpredictable. That is reinforcement learning in plain terms. Your behavior repeats faster when rewards come after uncertain effort. The key detail is not the food. It is the pattern of reinforcement that teaches persistence. Housing voucher feeds can borrow the same pattern. A platform can serve a burst of anger about a voucher fraud, and then follow it with a supportive detail, a conflicting claim, and a new clip, all arriving at irregular intervals. The reward becomes the next click, share, and the next sense that something is urgent. In 2014, Kramer, Guillory, and Hancock published an experiment on Facebook feeds in Pigeons. Their study tested whether changing which posts people saw could shift their emotional language in later posts. Track how anger spreads faster than careful context when posts are filtered. The study reported that exposure to more positive or more negative posts measurably changed the language people used afterward. That matters for voucher-related rage because anger travels well in short text and quick videos, while context takes longer to process. Now put that beside housing bureaucracy. Someone searching for a voucher has to understand rules about eligibility porting, paperwork, and inspection timelines, and that understanding competes with a feed that keeps serving emotionally charged fragments. If the feed pushes negativity, the user becomes more reactive, and reactive users click more to reduce uncertainty, even when the clicks do not resolve the real question. Harvard economists Allcott and Gentzkow have built a research line around how misinformation spreads in major elections. Their work emphasized that false claims can gain disproportionate attention when platforms rank content for engagement. Consider whether engagement first ranking makes outrage more durable. When attention drives distribution, the best predictor is often how much people react, not whether the claim is accurate. That pushes the feed toward emotionally vivid content, because vivid content generates faster reactions than carefully. Housing voucher outrage fits that template. A clip that implies a systemic threat can travel more easily than a policy link that explains inspection standards or payment timeline. The result is a faster loop where the user keeps looking for the next correction and the platform keeps providing new emotional cues before corrections catch up. Ingrid Gould Ellen, a researcher at the Urban Institute, has documented how landlord behavior shapes whether housing choice. Vouchers get used successfully. Her work highlights that even when families qualify, local screening practices can block leasing. Notice how a voucher holder gets squeezed by timing and documentation. If a landlord cares about credit scores, income verification, or inspection results, then a family has to produce paperwork. That pressure already exists in real life, where one missed document can mean another delay. Rage, outreach spikes add a new obstacle. When the feed presents voucher use as a risk story, landlords and communities may treat voucher holders as suspects, even if the underlying program rules are. The voucher process then turns from a follow the steps into a fight the narrative, and the story-based friction makes the next search click feel necessary. Think about a real-world pattern in digital help. Seeking a person refreshes after every new warning. You see a short post about hidden fees or a voucher scam. Then you refresh for proof, and the next alert arrives before you finish reading the official guide. Track how that refresh loop mirrors reinforcement schedules in everyday life. Variable timing rewards the checking behavior, because sometimes you get a clarifying comment, and sometimes you get a louder claim. Over time, checking becomes the default coping strategy, even when the information quality varies. Now zoom in on housing logistics. Voucher holders often face waiting lists, unit availability limits, and strict deadlines for submitting forms and scheduling inspections. The feed that injects fear keeps their attention trapped on the next update, and that distraction increases the chance of missing a step that actually matters. Many major platforms have experimented with feed ranking that responds to engagement signals like clicks, watch time, comments, and shares, even without naming a single algorithm change. The behavioral logic is consistent. Whatever makes people react gets amplified. Revisit the comment section and notice what repeats. Outrage threads tend to attract more responses quickly, and quick response is a measurable signal. When a post triggers strong emotions and wide reactions, feeds may continue recommending similar content that matches the emotional pattern. That can create reinforcement, even when the information may be incomplete. The effect is social visibility and psychological relief, but it can come at the cost of accuracy. Families trying to understand voucher rules get pulled into debate cycles, while the administrative steps still require concentration and deadlines that rage does not help. Skinner's most practical takeaway is that persistence depends on how rewards arrive, not on how fair the situation feels. Under variable ratio schedules, response rates climb because the animal keeps testing for the next payoff. Behavior strengthens even when the reward is rare on any one press. That is why variable reinforcement often looks addictive to people outside the experiment. Notice how a maybe next system outlasts a read this system. In feed environments, a single outrage post can generate enough early engagement to be treated as promising. The platform then surfaces similar posts again, and the user experiences that as ongoing possibility for more payoff. Each return feels justified because the last return was rewarded. Voucher misinformation works because it can be almost right and still trigger response. The post uses a real term like a waiting list, but swaps in a false claim about eligibility timelines. The emotional trigger still lands. The correction must then fight not only wrong details, but also the reinforcement the wrong post already provided. Variable reinforcement turns behavior into a strategy for survival in the moment. When the moment is anxious, the strategy feels smart. That is how outrage can outrun corrections even when the correction is available.